Hey, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to take the data sets that we downloaded in the previous videos containing our sentiment indicators, and I'm going to show you how to write some Python code using Backtrader to backtest some different strategies against these data sets to see if we can find some useful ways to use these sentiment indicators. And so we're going to produce this this series of charts that's on my screen. And so you can see at the very top here, there's the chart. So this is 10 years of data. This is the chart for the S&P 500. In the green, you'll see some buy points that our strategy would have made. And the red would be a point of exit. And then below that, you see where I've charted the indicators that I talked about, including the put-call ratio. So you see it's going down to below 0.4 here sometimes, and then above 1 sometimes. So this second row here is the put-call ratio. This third subplot here is the fear and greed index. You can see it's oscillating up and down between 0 and 100. So that's captured from the CNN data set that we had. And then at the bottom here, you see we have the VIX data here. And so this is the CBOE VIX data set that we downloaded. And you can see it's mostly between, the single digits around 10 and 40, except March of this year, which is very special, where it spiked all the way up to 80. And so what we can do is determine some numbers here that we can use to determine when there's extremes in market sentiment, either extreme fear or extreme greed, and test those numbers against the S&P 500 and see if we would have entered and exited at particular times, how that would have performed. And also we can think about maybe S&P 500 wouldn't be the asset that we bought. Maybe we could have bought a leveraged instrument or another individual stock and performed even better. So we'll discuss those topics in a moment. So before I get started in the code, once again, I continue. Thanks for everyone that keeps using this. I set up this buy me a coffee here to buy me a drink to show appreciation. And it looks like a few people have contributed since then. So we have this, I believe it's Levi Dahan here, bought me a drink. He said, thanks for the great videos. I'm building a DNN trading model, and your explanations of technicals showing how they work in code gave me some great new inputs. So thanks for that. Keep it up. So thank you very much, Levi. Pratesh here bought me some drinks here. He said videos are great, provides the right amount of details, programming and finance. He loves the topics, so thanks a lot there as well. And then Capital Mastery here said he's been working on similar projects this year, and he just made a contribution as well. So thanks to everyone that's contributed so far, and I'm going to leave a link below if you want to contribute as well. Otherwise, please like and subscribe the video and keep watching. I have a lot of new content coming. So I'm going to walk you through the code now. It's a little bit late on Sunday night, so I don't have time to write this in order. That actually takes me a really long time. And so what I did is create some of this code here, and I'm going to walk you through how it works and explain it. And then I'm going to post it to GitHub along with the data sets I used to produce these results. And you can clone it to your own desktop and play around with these numbers and see if it helps you find any strategies and if you can find uses of it. And you can plug in your own data sets as well. This is a good structure that you can use. So the first thing I have here is this run.py, and it's just a run script. So it's just a basic Python script, and I'm typing python3 run.py, and it's running, and it's pulling up my visualization here. It's running my whole backtest, right? If you watch any of my other Backtrader videos, I talk about this system from scratch. And so if you look it up, Backtrader, at backtrader.com. It's a backtesting system, a Python framework for backtesting and trading. And you can write a strategy classes. You can plug in indicators and analyzers and see what your results would have been. So you can test any of your trading ideas and see what the outcome would have been against historical data and test your ideas before you put them live in the market. So that's Backtrader. And so the first thing we need to do is you install Backtrader. So you can do, as usual, pip3 install Backtrader, and so you can install that, right? So I've already installed that before, so install that if you don't have it. And then you'll also see that I import, I don't even think I need this OS anymore, so I'll delete that. And I'm importing some strategy classes here, and I'll talk about that in a second. So the first thing you do with any Backtrader program, I'm importing Backtrader as BT, so that's Backtrader there. And so you instantiate this Cerebro object, which is like the control center or the brain for this backtester, right? So every Backtrader program, you need to instantiate backtrader.cerebro here. And then this Cerebro has a broker, which is just like your stockbroker. You have an initial amount of capital, and so you tell it how much capital you want to start out with. So it, by default, I believe it starts with $10,000, but let's say if you have $100,000, you can change that number to $100,000. And then when you buy and sell, it'll be subtracting and adding from that cash value. So you'll maintain a cash balance, and also you'll own some amount of equity depending on what you've purchased, right? And then, so once you have this Cerebro object set up, you've initialized your cache, you need to give it some data feeds. And so we've downloaded a number of data feeds on this channel. A lot of them are from Yahoo Finance. And all a data feed is a date, usually with some open, high, low, close data or some other numbers that we can analyze. And so you see here in my datasets directory, I've cleaned up the datasets that we downloaded in the previous video. And so I have this dataset, for instance, of the put call ratio. And so I've combined these actually. So I have a few datasets. So there's one dataset here I have, it's called SPY Put Call Fear Greed VIX, and that's just a combined dataset. And let me open that in a spreadsheet real quick, just so you can see what that looks like. So we got all those different pieces of data, and what I did is get the regular Yahoo Finance open, high, low, close of the SPY, which also comes with adjusted close and volume, and Backtrader knows how to read that out of the box. And then what I did is add a few columns of data here. So I got the put call ratio for each of those dates, lined it up, pasted it down in a column, so we have that lined up with the correct dates. And then we also have a line of data, that's the fear greed index for all of those dates. And we also have another line of data, or a column of data, for the VIX for all of those dates. So I can associate whatever the SPY's closing price was with whatever the put call ratio was for that day, the fear greed index for that day, and the VIX for that day, and run some analysis based on that. So we have these lines of data, or this feed of data that's going into the system, and as we go through the dates and go through the lines of data, then we can apply our trading strategy to those lines of data and enter and exit positions, and that'll adjust the amount of cash in our brokerage that we've set to 100,000 at the beginning, right? So to define these data feeds, so you save these data feeds, right? And then, so I've saved one combined data feed, but then I've also, in order to create those separate charts, what I did was create separate feeds for CSV. And so I created these that just have a date and then the put call ratio, for instance. So this is date and just the put call ratio. And I put it in the fourth column, and it looks like Backtrader wants like the fourth column to be like the close, and it plots the close by default. There might be a way to change that, but I've just put the, I've left these open, high, low empty for a put call, and then just put a closing column. So the put call is the fourth column here. And so we have these individual CSV files where I save the indicators, the numbers by themselves. So I have the fear greed in the fourth column by itself. So it's like the closing fear greed, the closing put call, and the closing VIX here. So I've saved these separately and also save them in a combined data set. Okay. So what you need to do is to tell Backtrader about a data set, you need to create this feed object, or extend this CSV data object. So I've created a class, and you can give it whatever name. So the combined one, I just call it SPY Put Call Fear Greed VIX data, and I'm extending the generic CSV data class. So out of the box, there's like a generic date open, high, low, close class that's built into Backtrader, and you need to extend it if you want to add some extra attributes or extra data that you need. So I'm extending that class by putting this in parentheses here. And what I'm telling it is that there's some additional lines of data. So I'm telling it about the put call line, the fear greed line, and the VIX line, because it doesn't know about what those are. And since I'm including those, I'm saying make these lines of data available to my strategy. And in this params tuple here, right, I'm telling it the date time format. So I'm saying year, month, day, since that's how we stored it. So year, month, dash day. And then also as usual, there's date, open, high, low, close, adjusted volume, and volume. And so that's the 0th column, 1st column, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And I tell it that the put call ratio is in the 7th column, fear greed is in the 8th column, and the VIX is in the 9th column. And then this lets me clearly define this data feed in such a way that Backtrader understands it. And then I also created some additional data feeds that are just the put call ratio by itself. And so I want to tell it, here's a data feed with the put call by itself. That way we can create these separate plots and show plots side by side. And there may be another way to do this, but this is how I did it. So I have a very simple put call data that extends generic CSV data, and I just have the date, and I say the put call is in the 4th column, and then we say volume and open interest are not present. So you need to put this -1, and that signifies that's just the way a Backtrader indicates that those columns are not available. So I just put -1 on both of those, and then likewise fear and greed, same thing. I say the fear and greed is in the 4th column. None of this other stuff is available. In the VIX data, I say the VIX is in the 4th column. Okay, and then all I do is I give it a path to those files. So I say this file, this CSV file, is in my datasets directory, and it's called putcall.csv, right? And so I put that in variable, and then we instantiate these data feed classes that we have, and we give it a data name, and we give it the CSV file. So we define our mappings in this class, and then we pass it the name of our data file and store this in a data feed variable here. So we have a variable called SPY combined feed, put call feed, fear greed feed, and VIX feed. And then we take our Cerebro object, which already has cache, and then we add data to it. So we add these feed objects to it, and then now our control center knows about our historical data, and it knows about the amount of cache we have. And so now we need to tell it how to execute trades on this data. And to do that, we need to add a strategy. So we do Cerebro add strategy, and we need to give it a strategy class. And the strategy class we define ourselves. And so the first class I defined is the fear greed strategy. So the fear greed strategy uses the fear and greed index. And so I imported it at the top here. And then if you look in the file system here, I defined a class called fear greed strategy. So any Backtrader strategy class needs to extend a Backtrader.strategy. So we called it fear greed strategy. We initialize the class whenever we instantiate it. So we create an instance of fear greed strategy. We set self.feargreed equal to that fear greed number that we defined in our lines. And then also we set the close equal to the close attribute. So this strategy is in reference to this first SPY put call fear greed VIX data. So we defined a line called fear greed, and then here we're saying our fear greed strategy wants to use that line. So we're interested in this data line called fear greed. And then all we need to do is override this method called next. And basically it says as we're traversing through the dates, so it starts on January 2nd, 3rd, 4th of 2011, all the way down to the present day of 2020. And so we say on the next line or the next date, right? What we need to do is run this strategy. And so what I do is calculate the size of the position I would enter. And so here I'm going all in with the cash I have. And then, so the size of it is equal to, if I had $100,000 and the SPY was 100, right? The size would be 1,000 here. So we're calculating the size of our entry. And then all we need to do is define the rules on these data lines on which we'll enter and exit this strategy. And so we have a line called fear greed, and 0 refers to the current fear greed index on the date it's on. So we're on next. So basically it's going next. And so if it's January 3rd, fear greed 0 would be the fear greed on January 3rd, but we can also make a reference to the previous fear greed. So if I did fear greed -1, that should get the fear greed index value from January 2nd if that's in our data feed. And so what I'm doing here is guessing some numbers that I could use to determine when to buy and sell. And so what I'm saying is if the current fear greed index is less than 5, so it's extreme fear, and I'm not in the position, so I'm not self.position, then size, I've already calculated size up there, I don't need that. I'm going to say self.buy, size equals size. So I'm saying go all in with all of my cash if the fear greed index is less than 5. And then I'm also saying when there's extreme greed on that indicator, if fear greed is greater than 94, and I have a position so my position size is greater than 0, then I'm going to sell that entire position. And so what I did was tweak these numbers a little bit, and so you can just try different things. And so let's say I want to try 80 and 20 here, right? And I added this fear greed strategy here in my run.py, and then I say Cerebro run and plot it, right? And I don't think I need this subplot, so let's do that. Okay, so I'm not going to plot the volume, and then let's run this, and let's see what happens. Okay, and so I defined my strategy saying, what numbers did I use again? 80 and 20. So fear greed is less than 20 buy, fear greed greater than 80 sell. And then if I expand my visualization, so when I run it, what it does is plot all of those different data feeds that I passed in. So I have my plot of the SPY, my plot of the put call ratio, my plot of the fear greed index, and my plot of the VIX. And you see these green arrows visualize when I would have bought. So this first green arrow, we said the fear greed needed to be less than 20. And so this chart down here, the second to last one, is the fear greed index. And you can see this green arrow corresponds to this drop here when the fear greed index looks like it fell way down there. So fell down right there. What date is that? It's kind of hard to read. Okay, in the bottom right there, I can see this is around March of 2011. That registered some extreme fear there. And then you see we later sold that. And you can see we later sold that whenever there was some greed above 80. And it looks like that wasn't a very good move. It looks like it was profitable, but it kind of sold off more and we were already in the position, and then it came back and then we sold. So not much profit there. But you can see there's some pretty good entry points here. There's green, there's red, there's a low, we bought right there. There's a low, we bought a little higher. And just by kind of luck, you know, the S&P 500 is already kind of increasing during this whole period. So we did make money. So if you look in the top right here, this shows our broker and how much cash we have. And it looks like this blue number here, we started with $100,000 and we finished with $212,441. So over doubled our money when buying and selling here, plus some dividends, which I didn't calculate, but we'll have to add to that in order to get very specific there. But over doubled our money, which sounds pretty good, but at the same time, you remember back in the beginning of 2011, the S&P 500 was like 1250 or something. So it's actually outperforms buying and hold. Buying and holding would have outperformed the strategy I just came up with here. So even though we're making pretty good buys and sells, you know, we miss out on a lot of the middle, and we missed on dividends, we paid taxes and so forth. But you know, this maybe you couldn't have held for 10 years. Maybe you would have panicked. So this is a guideline that maybe helps you psychologically, and you still double your money, which is pretty good. And so that's not the end of this, though. We can tweak these numbers even more if we want to fit this further to the data. You want to be careful not to, you know, fit exactly to this data because it won't work. You know, no period of time is ever going to be exactly like this exactly like this again. But if I do numbers like, I think I found if I did like 5 and 94, that was the number I found that worked even better. So if you run that, that'll pull it up again, and you see in that particular scenario, like this waits till it's extreme fear, like not just below 20 but below 5, which is very rare, and then waits until the extreme greed is way up above like 94, and then so you see there's not many buys and sells in that situation, and so you see you get this one buy point here, you're in the trade a long time. And so only a couple of trades here, but it looks like the final result is you more than tripled your money. So you go from 100,000 to 325,000, which is pretty good. I think that's better than the S&P 500 in that time frame, but also you paid some taxes and so forth. So that's the fear and greed index. You can play around with those values to see if you find some value there. So yeah, it looks like it gives you some pretty good timing. You can find some pretty significant bottoms using this, and you know, you can roughly match the S&P, but also you don't even though this is the S&P 500, you don't necessarily need to buy the S&P 500. So if you can detect fear reliably like this, what if you bought a leveraged instrument like the TQQQ, so it went extra long tech, or SPXL, and you bought a triple long SPY, you might have performed really well. I haven't tried that yet. We'll probably try that towards the end of the video. What if when there was extreme fear, I went triple leveraged or bought a triple ETF? We might have performed great. Or if we bought the strongest momentum stocks at that time that sold off huge, like, this year it would have been like Zoom, Zillow, Redfin, all those things sold way off. And so, you would get some 5X and 10Xers in there. So let's say you bought some momentum stocks into overall market fear, that probably would have performed pretty well. And we can probably talk about that more in a little bit. So that's the fear greed strategy. And so how do we create other strategies? So what I've done here is created a put call strategy. Same concept. We took the BT strategy class, we extended it. We told it about the put call line that we've defined in our data feed. And then our next here, we get our size, and we just say, so as we discussed, a put call ratio greater than 1 indicates, tons of put buying, which means there's a lot of fear. And so if there's a lot of fear, everyone's buying puts. What if we're to buy? And then what if when everyone is buying calls and the put call ratio is less than 0.45 or 0.5, right? We're not in the position we sell, right? We're selling all of that greed. And so if I go back to my run.py here, instead of adding the fear greed strategy, let's try to add the put call strategy. So I'll do that, and I'll import the put call strategy. So I'll do from put call strategy, import put call strategy. And if I run it again, so on this one, it looks like we get a few entries. We go from 100,000 to 145,000. If we tweak these numbers a bit, we can adjust that. You can see different outcomes. So I think I found if I did 0.45 and maybe 1.05, there's some different numbers we can try there and to see what the optimal strategy would have been over this particular time period. And I'll run it again, and you can see I can probably get a result that's a little better. So if I do I think 0.45 and 1. Let's see what that results in. So yeah, this will get me 100,000 to 240,000, it looks like. And so, this gets a period of some fear here, and we ride the trend a while. Exit captures this first. What is this? 2015. I don't know if you remember, depending on how long you've been trading, there's a pretty big sell-off in August of 2015. That's when we would have entered. And then there's that 2016, but we're already in the position. And so, yeah, you can see that would have resulted in 240,000 from 100,000. So that's about roughly 2.5 times there. And you can play around with those numbers as well. Maybe you don't go all in or all out. Maybe you wait for a second reading, a second retest of the lows. There's a lot of different things you can do with this. But I just wanted to give you some examples of strategies that you could program in and how to use Backtrader to work with these custom indicator data sets that we downloaded. And then finally, this VIX strategy, I've actually demonstrated that in another video, and so I could run that. And so I'm going to go ahead and add this to our source code as well before I put it on GitHub. So I'm going to do a VIX strategy, import a VIX strategy, right? And I put that in there, and then you can see if I add that strategy, right? Use a different strategy, and it's nice because we can just plug and play different strategies. We can build strategy classes, apply them to other assets, lots of reusable code that we can use here for many different purposes. And so what did I call it? A VIX strategy with a capital. Okay, and that, and that. And I called it fear greed strategy there. So I'm going to run that. Right, and then we have one more strategy here, and it looks like it went from 100K to 260K over this time period. Right, and you can see at the very bottom here, we got this spike in the VIX, and so this is buying when the VIX is over 35. This captures this point in August of 2011. There was a pretty big, like a 20% sell-off at that point, and then you actually stay in there for a while with this strategy. And yeah, 260,000. So yeah, you can play with these numbers. And so maybe you can combine all these indicators together into a single strategy. So the VIX is a certain value, the fear of greed is a certain value, put call is a certain value, and so forth. And maybe combine them with some other data set you have in order to create something unique. So that's a few examples of using the VIX and the put call ratio and the fear greed strategy. And yeah, this is how you download these data sets that indicate market sentiment, and how you can build some strategies using Backtrader and test those strategies out. So that's it for today. I hope you liked the video. Stay tuned. I got a lot of new videos coming out. I'm still working on a series on spinning up your own server on Linode, your own virtual private server, and I'm going to also talk a bit about relational databases. So I'm going to load some of this data into a MySQL or Postgres database and put it up there on a server and build a front-end dashboard for it. And we're going to have something that's always running and continue incrementally building on that, so until it's some sort of product. So stay tuned for that. I'm hoping to get that started over the next couple of weeks here. So thanks a lot, and see you in the next video.